444.18-1-40 EMTK Realty, 1736 Route 6, amended final site plan approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We actually think the improvements here are good. Everything's up to code now, which is beneficial to us.
Thank you very much.
McDonald's? Is there a representative from McDonald's here tonight? Okay. D&L Ford Inc., Kids Country. It's on for a public hearing. Mike?
This is on for public hearing. They submitted floor plans and the sign detail that I asked for. All my comments have been addressed.
Rich had no comments.
Rich has no comments on this. There are no planning issues left with this, Mr. Chairman. It's on for public hearing, and you do have a site plan approval resolution before you this evening as well.
Is there anyone from the audience that wants to be heard on McDonald's?
No. Ford.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ford.
Kids Country, D&L Ford.
Are we familiar with this? That I'm sure everyone here is. We've met a few times on this.
Right, we've gotten our
Sites made
variances.
some improvements. You were in front of the zoning board a couple of weeks back.
Correct.
The zoning board approved. It was adding children to the upstairs area. We actually referred them back to the zoning board a month or so ago, giving the zoning board time to review, which they did and approved. Any comments from anyone on the board here?
No, good.
Any comments from the audience? This is a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, being there's no public comment, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer the resolution. Make a resolution of the Planning Board of the Town of Carmel, number 18-17, July 25th, 2018. Tax map number 65.13-1-52. D&L Ford, Kids Country, 854 Route 6, amended final site plan approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Mancini, Danielle, and Courtney, 149 McGregor Drive. It's a regrading application.
Hello, my name's Hank. I'm here for my son. He's out of town.
Okay. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, this is on for public hearing. I have no further comments at this time.
Pat?
Regrading application, no planning issues, on for public hearing, and I don't believe Rich has any issues on this one as well.
Yeah, I believe Rich's earlier comment was that the overall disturbance for the project was 4,880 square feet, which is below the threshold.
That's correct.
And Rich also had no comments. Being this is open for a public hearing, is there anyone from the public that'd like to be heard on this regrading application?
Mr. Chairman, being there are no public comments, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Pat, would you
Prepare a resolution for the
Please.
next meeting, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just circle back to see if anyone from McDonald's has arrived. Okay. Alexandrian Distillery. It's here for a public hearing this evening. Mike?
This is on for public hearing. All of my comments, I got the variances that were necessary from the zoning board, and they are noted on the plat.
Pat?
This is on this evening, Mr. Chairman, for a public hearing.
And I believe Rich had no comments.
No comments.
I'd like to open it up to the public for comment.
Mr. Chairman, I think you want to have the applicant make a presentation first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. My name is Will Stevens. I'm an attorney for the owner of the property, which is proposed to be developed by Alexandrian Distillery. With me in the audience today, we have the chairman of Alexandrian, Dr. Nawaz Salem, the CEO of Alexandrian Group, Stelios Sava, Alan Anderson, who is our master distiller, Stephen Cruddy, who is a business development director for United States. We also have with us Randy Tharp, who is the vice president of Epstein Group, the engineering consultant on the project, Matt Shore, senior project architect of Epstein Group, Harold Epler, who is the principal of Hinckley Holdings, the owner of the property, myself, Seamus Crickley, who is a principal with WEW Consulting Engineers out of Ireland. They are water, wastewater consultants. And David Timmons, who is with Timmons Spirit Science, who will be here to respond to any questions that may arise.
Maybe to open up, you can give us a little overview of the project before I open it up to the public?
If I could defer to one of the, Randy, if you'd like to come up and just, or maybe. Nawaf Salam.
Yeah, just introduce yourself when you come up into the microphone so I can hear. Thank you.
Good evening. Our group, it is started in Europe, built last 25 years. After 2000, we bought some companies in Europe. Sahin, this is the oldest company of the group. It is 1789. So and this is our expertise in distillation, our expertise in distillation. We are present in 50 countries around the world. We chose U.S. for one reason, because we believe in U.S. And we need to use our distillery in U.S. for the export. So at least 50%, even more, of the capacity of the distillery will be for the export product, not just for the U.S. market. We will hire at least 100 people just in this area, qualified people, not worker. So we talk about qualified people, we talk about top management, we talk about marketing, sales, R&D, engineer, and export people. So because we need to use the staff of US to take care of the globally market of the export. In Europe, we have at least 800 people. We pay taxes around 50 million euro per year in small countries. So in US, can you imagine how much could be the amount? We are open always to do a correct, what we do, everything. Also, big part of our group supporting social activity. In Europe, we are own of award of culture people. We support also the sport, all the type of the activity of the sport. You can check in the website or the social media to see about our group. So we are not just producer of the drinks. We have another business also, not in Europe. We have a stone producer. We have also hotels and agricultural land. So we are a mix of the things. And after, I think in the next 5 years, we will have around 500 people around all US. So this is our business. We talk about something very seriously. We'll be the biggest distillery in New York. We believe in New York, and we need to export the successful of New York around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Stelios Sava. I am the CEO of Alexandrian Group. I am with the group for the last 10 years. First of all, I have to say that we are really proud to be here. We really love the location. We really love the city. That's one of the reasons that we chose to have the distillery in this area. We are here to work together with the society and with the town hall for something that will be very good for the city, for the town. To get all our engineers here will explain about the project, and we are really looking forward to a great collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Randy Tharp. I'm with Epstein Architects and Engineers. I'd like to explain and basically present the project as well as refer and bring up a couple of our consultants to address some issues and concerns. Primarily, this project is a redevelopment of the existing Paladin Center site on 39 Seminary Road. And we've looked at it as a redevelopment project. One of the options would be to raise the buildings and existing facilities and start from scratch. But actually, we found the facility to have a lot of features and capabilities that we can utilize so that we can modify this existing building in a number of ways to put the operation in use. On the site plan that we presented, the gray areas are the areas where we would be basically touching and making some structural impacts. A couple of the areas, the existing foundations of the old seminary school building, which is now has a roof over it and is enclosed. We are going to build a visitor center there. Other areas of the operation where the pot stills and distillation stills are, we're going to redo the facade, make a different improvement, and provide some glazing. We'll show that in a little bit on some of the rendering drawings. And then some internal operations. We have a large area inside the building for fermentation tanks. And so we're going to raise the roof and make the roof a little bit taller, but within the limits as required by the zoning ordinance. And then we've got some outbuildings that we're putting in, which for wastewater pretreatment in order to meet the city standards for waste into the wastewater treatment system, as well as water treatment and some water storage. We also have an area where we have cooling towers that will be located on the back side of the building, which are part of the process. So basically, on the site, we have maintained all of the existing access road. The primary access to this facility will be from Route 6 for commercial purposes. There will be traffic to this site. Mr. Salome mentioned that there'll be approximately 100 employees in this area. There will only be about 60 employees at this facility for the operations, which include both the visitor center and operations of the distillery. Those will actually be spread across 3 shifts. The facility will operate for distillation purposes on 5 days a week, 24 hours during those 5 days. The off shifts are only about 5 employees or less, just to monitor equipment and processes that are going on. There will be on a daily basis, probably no more than 6 to 8 trucks a day, either bringing in grains to the site or taking off finished product, or there are some waste materials, which mostly is the spent grains after the mash process, which go to animal feed in the local area. So that's pretty much all the traffic, and again, all of that will be directed off of Route 6. We'll be making some minor improvements, which Rich is aware of in regards to some widening of some of those access ways, mostly for emergency vehicle access, so that we can have emergency vehicles clear path to get all the way around the site. I mentioned this is just a floor plan of the building. Basically, we're utilizing most of the bulk of the main building of the existing guideposts or original guidepost facility as they built it, now being operated by Paladin Center. Area where there's that faces Seminary Road will be where we'll have the copper pot stills in that area. The existing kind of opaque facade will be replaced with a glass facade so that you'll be able to see the pots and the copper pots in that area. We have a 3-story clear height there. We'll have a couple levels within there for visitors to have access to see. We will utilize this basically also as a tour, so there will be touring through the active distillery area. Where the fermentation room is, those will be large tanks, and again, there'll be access to see into the fermentation tanks and see the fermentation process taking place. On the back of the building is where we have most of our receiving for our grain silos and for the mash process, which produces the mash that goes into the fermentation tanks for the distillation to begin and basically create the alcohol. And then On the plan, the lower portion of the plan is basically warehouse operation as well as some bottling and casking. There'll be no storage at this facility. No aging will take place. Only storage that might be here would be basically any bottled storage before it gets shipped out and distributed, but no long-term storage or aging at this facility. We do have some alcohol storage tanks that are outside the building, and we've consulted with the fire department and have agreed to meet requirements that they have for meeting all the fire protection issues and basically supplement with firefighting equipment there that they don't have within their normal process. So,
Excuse me, before you move from that graphic, before you move from that one, can you just identify, there's lots and lots of tanks, I understand it's a busy process tank-wise. What's indoors and what is outdoors of any of those?
well, this is all indoors. This is the only portion that's
Okay.
outdoors.
And what was that for?
That is for alcohol storage.
That's the alcohol storage.
Yeah, and that has a certain zone by code that it has to be set away from the building. So we've set it away from a fire protection standpoint. It will also have a concrete containment barrier around it. So if there were any leak, although there'll be leak detection in all of the tanks, but basically we'll have leak detection as well as a barrier. So if there were any leak, it's all contained and does not spill outside that concrete barrier.
Will there be a fire suppression system
Yes,
dedicated to that area?
a foam system for that.
Foam system, okay.
How tall are those tanks? I'm curious about the potential visual impact. Is there screening?
I think we've got them right now. They're under the 40-foot limit, the same as the building within that. Actually, quite a bit, I think, under the 40.
lower than the building.
They're lower than the building.
Okay, so, all right, good.
We also have a grade difference in the site, this being higher.
Yep.
So we're dropping down considerably, at least almost a floor and a half level from the front here to the back here. If you haven't ever been on that site, there's a considerable slope as you come down this side on the south side of the site. So it's going to be almost impossible to see those tanks from the road. I would say pretty much impossible from Seminary. And of course, if you're coming, nothing is visible from Route 6 because there's forest and trees basically there.
Thank you.
Just while we're talking about elevations, you had mentioned earlier the cooling towers are in the back of the building, right?
Cooling towers are down here in the corner,
On ground level?
on ground level.
Okay. Now, what
But
will
they'll actually
shield them?
be slightly elevated because of the way
They're
the
not gonna be
cooling
on a
tower
roof.
has to
Okay.
operate. There'll be a
Yep.
tank of water underneath those, so, but they're not going to be roof mounted or anything.
Okay.
And that's preferred in a way, both from a visual impact standpoint as well as from a perspective of maintenance and operation. The design of the building, we wanted to, the new portion, the one new portion we are doing is the visitor center. And we wanted to do something that was reflective of kind of the history of the site. So we did some research into the facade or the appearance of the old Drew Seminary School. So this is basically what was there. I think a lot of people, and I myself first, visiting the site, thought that the 3-story white building with the gambrel roof was one of the original buildings, and actually it's not. The original building foundation that you'll see is a very low stone foundation right now, and this building sat on top of it. We've got some photos on the back side of this I'll show you that show original as well as current condition. And you can see we still have the same original stone pillars at the entrance to the site. And our plan is to somewhat reflect the gambrel roof form that the Drew Seminary School had, actually over top of the original foundations. We'll use new structural foundations, obviously, to support that, but we wanted to do something that was reflective of that, takes into account the history, the local context, local materials. So there'll be some stone incorporated, some wood incorporated into the new facade. And then you can flip to the new facade to show a little bit about what we're looking at from the front. This is the view from, would be what we would see from Seminary. This is the original, or existing guidepost building up on the top here, where we taking down that opaque facade and putting in the glass. Also doing a trellis over the top of it, give it a little bit of sun shading because it faces west right now. So we'll give it a little bit of sun shading, add a little bit more character to it. Take the sort of plain portion of the industrial portion of the facade as well and update that with some trellis work. And then, as I mentioned, the new visitor center, we'll take the gambrel roof form, and our idea and concept for that is to make a portion of the existing foundations a roof terrace, and then basically have a progression of space that moves from outdoor space to covered space to indoor space, so that we have a center that can kind of be used for a number of purposes as well as a number of weather conditions. Obviously, on a day like this, it may not be so pleasant to sit on the terrace, but it might be nice to sit under a covered roof and get some fresh air coming in. So I'd like to address some concerns or questions that have come up over the time as we've gone through the process. One of the primary ones has been, a couple of them have been on water supply and water usage, as well as wastewater. And I'd like to ask Henry Boyd to come up because we've investigated the use of artesian wells and drilling on the site in order to supplement any city water usage and possibly really minimize our impact on the use of city water. Henry?
Hi, I'm Henry Boyd, Boyd Artesian Well Company in a place called Carmel, New York. So I'm kind of the local driller. The amount of water they're looking for is not a tremendous amount of water from what I know. And the area has no wells whatsoever. So that means that when they drill a well for a condo project somewhere, we have to go make sure we're not sucking the water out of everybody else's wells. And there are nothing else in the area. The only wells that we've drilled in the area are for Pulte Homes, drilled some irrigation wells. I got some really good wells for them. I got some really bad wells for them. But no matter what, they have enough water for their irrigation. Shouldn't affect them because they're far enough away. And the only other wells that we know of are down Route 6 farther. There's a subdivision that we drilled 15 years ago probably. I can't tell you the name of the road. But most of those wells had 10 or 15 gallons a minute in each well. But you know, we get so far and we stop. People don't like to pay me for extra footage. So I really feel there's no problem getting enough water for what they need. It's not a whole lot of water. And I'm really glad that the town won't let them use their water because it's good business for us. And it looks like it's going to bring a lot of people into our community and good people who are coming into our community. So anything else you want me to say? No? Okay. So any questions? Yeah.
We're gonna open up for questions after the introduction, so I'd like to finish the introductions and then we'll open up to questions.
I just have a question. How many wells are you considering putting on this property?
Well, they want as few as possible, and I want as many as possible. All right. We have to bring in a hydrologist. We do a fracture analysis, and there's a guy named Trump. You've probably heard of him. He used to build golf courses in New York. And when we'd go in, he'd have 100 acres or so to build a golf course. And we'd bring in our hydrologist. We do a fracture tracing analysis. And the hydrologist will say, well, stay in the top 10 acres and drill up in there. That looks like the most porous area for finding water. We did that over for Pulte. That's why we've got some good wells, some bad wells. A couple of wells we just drilled and got nothing. And when the geologist came in, the hydrologist, we did much better results over there. But we're looking at probably between, if I only got 20 gallons a minute in a well, and we drilled 5 wells, that'd be 100 gallons per minute. And that's more than what they need. And actually, you always want to drill multiple wells in case one well goes out. And so they always have a backup system till we can repair the old well. So probably a minimum of 5.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
In regards to both water treatment, again, Randy Tharp with Epstein, and in regards to water treatment and also wastewater treatment, I'd like to bring up to discuss a little more about the figures and the technology we're using, because one of the things we've done through discussions preliminarily with Rich and Mike and the team here at Carmel is to come up with ways to save water and reduce water. So we've developed with the process engineers some water-saving technologies, and I'll have Seamus come up to discuss that, what those technologies are, and also some of the volumes and water flows that we're looking at from water consumption as well as for waste stream for the facility.
Good evening, everybody. Seamus Crickley is my name. I'm from Ireland, a chartered engineer. We're specialist engineers in the water, wastewater, and energy and conservation sustainability area internationally. On this particular project, having viewed it, basically, it does appear from the preliminary studies that we'll need about 135,000 gallons of water for the process, and that's from the distillation process itself. Now that water, the sources of it can be, and are in this case, over a number or from a number of different areas. The first one basically is, as just described there, the boreholes themselves. We can have borehole water, obviously will be pre-treated or before being stored or used. And most borehole water in this area, you understand, issues like iron and manganese could be present. So,
Can you speak a little louder, please? I'm sorry. Speak into the microphone a little bit. Thank you.
Sorry. So that particularly isn't an issue. There's plenty of water. It could be that from the analysis so far, possibly 2 boreholes will be adequate on it. And I'll go down through the capacities from each source in a moment. The other area really is recycling technology. Now, as just to outline what needs to be done in a case like this, having decided the amount of water that is required, different areas of the process will require different water qualities. But we all start, I suppose, with a norm, clean water, the clean water in accordance with the AWWA standards. And then above that, in some cases, we may need water which is higher quality, but that is done within the process. So the water treatment plant obviously is designed as purpose design one-off for an application like this, and that is a standard approach internationally. In this particular case, the wastewater having come from the main distillation process is the CIP, cleaning in place wastewater, is taken to evaporation. And basically a co-product spirit is developed from that. And the overflow from the evaporation then goes to wastewater, not the total, as in some cases in earlier distilleries that did happen. So the load is greatly reduced across the evaporator. Then coming down to treatment, we need to treat the wastewater, especially if we're going to recycle some of it or consider recycling any of it. It normally goes to a river or somewhere else after treatment. We put it through normally, balancing to collect it, equalize it, then going forward to pH correction so that it's neither acidic or alkaline. And then, if it's necessary, we may need to add nutrients before going to a biological stage. The biological stage basically will reduce the carbon equivalent and some of the nitrogen in cases down to a minimum level. Going on from there, it needs to be filtered. We go on to an area of membrane filtration. Different pressures across different membranes will give different qualities. It sounds poetic, but anyway, the low pressure membrane will remove what is the carbon fouling solids. Then going on to a higher pressure membrane, reverse osmosis will remove what it would be the real fouling solids, dissolved solids. And then the water quality coming off that is even better than we're going to get off a normal water treatment plant. Now, I'm delighted to say, having looked at this from an actuarial point of view, basically we have this built into the preliminary conceptual design. And it's not often that this happens, I must say. Internationally, there are probably out of 100, I can only place about 7 or 8 at the moment in my experience, and I've been through a lot of them. So I'm delighted to see it here. It's something that's going to come I would think within the next 5 to 10 years, people say more, but water is becoming a very scarce entity across the world and everywhere, even here, I would suggest. I know from my studies as a member of WPCF for years. Now, the point is, we have this membrane, the quality coming off it will leave the water then that can be recycled. It'll put a lower demand on any other source of raw water to be used. Most of all the town's water, so that we have sustainability will be applied. International sustainability at the moment is, it's being cried out for, to use the expression, but very few people are using the concept, developing the concept. It is built in here, there's no question. And I think the source then after that would be the town supply, if that is in order with everybody, connection from the town supply, but to be used only at a relatively lower end of the required scale. The breakdown of the figures from the 135,000 US gallons that I mentioned there, the boreholes, 2 boreholes we're looking at the moment, will range from 60,000 to 70,000 gallons, US gallons. Now that can vary. It has been mentioned there that you have a range of boreholes that give even some of them even greater than I'm saying. But I suppose a conservative figure really are the figures I'm talking about. The recycle itself, recycle technology at the moment as it's going in my area of business for industrial wastewater, and hopefully shortly it's going to come for domestic waste. Domestic sewage, by that I mean coming off a sewage plant. But the point is we should be able to remove up to 75% of the solids, so that 75% of the water will be recycled as clean water. In other words, at least equivalent to American Water Works Association standards. On top of that, the town supply water, it does appear from the preliminary designs that between 30,000 and 55,000 gallons per day of town mains water of AWWA standard could be requested, and under possibly the same set of discussions, but possibly under a separate license with the town council. And that gives the total, what is the mass balance. Now I should say that the wastewater resulting from the recycle process, the wastewater that we're anticipating will be only of the order of 20,000 to 40,000 US gallons per day out of a total recycled water for the process of 135,000. So that brings home the point, I think, that recycle technology is here. You're into what I would term 4th level technology. The processes are pretty well defined. At the moment, it is developing. The new areas of technology are probably led by Best Available Technology International expertise, and that is what is being proposed here. And I'm delighted to say, if it can be incorporated with the level of control that we need at the distillery level, then we have a perfect plant. So it's one that personally I'd be very proud to be associated with. So hopefully that outlines. One thing I might have missed is the sludge. Sludge is generated from the treatment. It's thickened and dewatered and taken away by a licensed contractor for use and valuable use. Then it is a very valuable sludge in that we've no toxic constituents, whatever, relative to metal sludges or something like that. So that covers everything, I think, in it. If there's any other point, please, if you could query.
We're going to hold the public comments until your introductions are done. Thank you.
One other area that has been brought up is concern about storage, and there are some byproducts or products of storage of alcohol. Again, we're not planning on doing any aging at the facility. There will only be limited cask storage of maybe 20 casks at the facility, mostly for the visitors' experience to see a full cask, possibly have tasting out of the cask. But there are concerns that have been brought up and brought to our attention regarding some of environmental impacts outside of storage facilities. So we have a consultant to address those, at least talk about those issues, clarify the release of ethanol and how much ethanol and what the impacts of that ethanol is from storage facilities. Again, that's not what we're doing here, and basically to clarify that and discuss that issue, and I'd like to ask
That'd be helpful.
David to
Thank you.
come up.
Hi, my name's David Timmons. I'm a consultant with Spirit Science. I've got 14 years experience in the distilled spirits industry, and for the past 5 worked as chairman of the Kentucky Distillers Association Technical Group, representing the bourbon industry in Louisville with regulatory boards and things. So the concern that's been brought up is we call it in the industry whiskey moss, or the molds that grow around whiskey warehouses. First and foremost, this is something that's associated with whiskey warehouses in the bourbon industry that hold anywhere from a standard warehouse holds 30 to 50,000 barrels, and you have, anywhere from 8 to 20 of those in a certain area in Kentucky. And then whenever you have houses that are very close to those warehouses, there can be these molds. It is basically on this site, because there's no aging, there's not going to be any issue with this at all. They have scrubbers on their fermenters. The ethanol emissions come from an angel share out of the barrel, and you lose 2 to 10% of the amount of ethanol in the barrel each year due to evaporation, and that's where your emissions come from. But it's not. I've got a little report here I can leave with you guys, but it is considered the barrel itself is RACT technology for the Clean Air Act, so it's reasonably available control technology, and it's a natural part in a way to control the emissions from ethanol.
Aren't those oak barrels that you're referencing, and you're not going to be having them here, or just a couple for display?
Yeah, they're just having 20 for display. So again, the emissions from the site are going to be less than a gas station. Gas blends are 10% ethanol, and there's going to be more ethanol and hydrocarbon emissions from any gas station in the city than this site. So big picture, that's what we need to convey. And molds around a gas station are going to be more than this site. So
You referred to it as whiskey mold. Is this phenomenon just limited to the production of whiskey, or is it?
No. This mold, it's an environmental mold similar to what grows on tree bark, and it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's one of those things that it's in the environment now. It's there before in Louisville. It's there before the distillery and before the houses, right? But the hydrocarbons provide fertilizer, and it grows as an opportunistic organism. And at the end of the day, it only grows whenever you have a tremendous amount of ethanol emissions over a very long period of time. I mean, it has been a media concern with some lawsuits in Louisville. And that happened, class action lawsuits were filed, and those were thrown out due to inability to meet class action status because of the proving a radius. So basically you would have a clean house next to a dirty house, and if you have regular routine maintenance, you don't have these sorts of dirt and environmental molds build up. It's kind of like your shower, right? I get mold in my shower if I don't clean it. So, but that's what was the basis for the lawsuits, and that's why they were thrown out.
But if we're talking about your facility here, your potential facility here, over a very, very long period of time, the way you're running the facility here, you would not anticipate any.
No, zero. I expect zero concern or for
Generations to come.
Generations to come on molds. Again, it's zero. We have scrubbers on the fermenters so no, which is a step above what any industry standard. Most people like to have open top fermenters for tours, or but everything is very very high end, first class, environmentally for the facility. So I mean it's top notch.
Anything else from the board? Thank you.
Last at this time, and invite Alan Anderson, who's a master distiller for Alexandrian, to come up, and he's just going to go over the distillation process, just so everybody understands what goes on inside the building, what the inputs. We also discussed already the outputs in terms of the wastewater, but Alan will discuss a few things on the process.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Alan Anderson, group distiller for Alexandrian. I'll give you a bit of background.
Please, I'm sorry, but please.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's.
Alan
thank you.
Anderson, group distiller for Alexandrian. I'll give you a bit of background of my history and past. Nearly 30 years in the industry. Started at Loch Lomond Distillers, who is now the Loch Lomond Group. Moved on to White Mackay, and I ran Invergordon Grain Distillery. From there to Slane, I designed this distillery there, which is now a Brown-Forman facility. Over to Ireland, I was converting the Hartwood Brewery for John Teeling, which I think people know, Teeling Whisky Company. So that distillery there is very, very similar to the design that we're actually implication here. It's about 6 million LA. That will use about 15,000 tons of locally grown grains, so it brings some money to the economy. We'll probably use about 1,000 casks a week, and they'll be sourced from local cooperages. And that's a mixture of virgin oak casks and used casks, bourbon casks. So everything that we're using is locally sourced. The operators and the engineers we hope to employ locally, and I personally will train these people up to become world-class distillers, basically. We'll be making a range of whiskies, single malt. We'll be doing bourbon, grain whiskey, similar to Scotch. What else? We'll be doing gin and vodka. So basically a distillery consists of 5 or 6 processes put together. So we have cereal storage, cereal handling, cereal milling, mashing, which consists, it's quite a new technology we're implying. It's a press that actually squeezes the sugars from the grains and the water. That then goes on to fermentation. Fermentation consists of basically water, grains and yeast, and that takes 2-3 days, making an alcoholic strength between 8 and 10%. So depending on what we're making, that then goes on to the column stills or the pot stills. We hope to make about 20,000 litres of alcohol per day, which is 6 million litres per annum. And in bulk terms, that's about 10 million. So it's a considerable amount of spirits. The rest is, I think my colleague Seamus has been over, is basically wastewater treatment and water intake. A huge focus on the design has been energy conservation. Normally a distillery takes about 7 kilowatts of power to make 1 litre of alcohol. And we've designed a distillery to half that, so it's about 3.5 kilowatts per litre of alcohol. So it's very, very green technology that we've employed. The whiskey, of course, will be first class. It will be very, very high quality. And I don't think there will be any problem selling the brands. That's basically my contribution.
Thank you very much. Okay, what I'd like to do now is open it up to the public, but anticipating several people want to speak, why don't we just start in the first row and work ourselves around the room? And introduce yourself and state your name, state your name when you come up, please.
My name is Barbara Sheriff, and I actually live right across the street.
Speak louder to my, what I'll ask Distillery to do is to make note of all the questions, because there might be some repetitive ones, and then after everyone has voiced their concerns, we'll ask the Distillery team to respond to everybody.
Sure. One question is the amount of trucks going in and out per day off Route 6.
Okay. Did you, the answer to that was 6, but I don't, that's what I heard spoken earlier, yeah.
6 to 8%.
Okay, there is parking in the front right now where this nice area is. Will there still be parking there, or is there only parking in the back?
The limited parking.
Yeah, and you know what's going to happen? They're going to have to
I'm
speak into the
sorry.
microphone,
Okay.
so it's best if he just notes the questions rather than coming up and down, and it'll go a little bit quicker for everybody. But we will answer every question, and you'll have an opportunity to circle back if your question was not answered.
Okay. I also need to know about the traffic on Seminary Hill. Which entrance will stay open and which will close, if any? Construction noise. Construction noise.
There is a code on that, and they would have to work within the code.
Okay. There are trees in the front that line the street, Seminary Hill, that are basically falling down at this point. Will they all be taken down and replaced? Which would be really important
Those
to
trees are on
replace
that,
them.
those trees are on that site?
Yeah. Smells coming out of the building. And then I guess my biggest concern, which they talked about, was whiskey fungus. I know he said no.
And we can circle back to that if
Yeah.
his explanation wasn't, we'll be happy to come back
Yeah.
to that.
I mean, that's the most important question.
Sure.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Anyone else in that second row going across?
Just questions or comments?
Either.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Carl Albano. I've lived in that neighborhood for over 40 years. This seems like a fantastic opportunity. I think it could really be a plus for the neighborhood without putting a burden on the schools. I live here. We have Watson Labs in one end of the area. I lived here when Guidepost was there with many, many cars, a lot more traffic than what this is going to produce. And it seemed to work very well. So I don't really have any questions now. I will watch this, but I look at this in a very positive light. It's great to see something come back to life. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The third row.
Hi, my name is Nina Walters, and I live on Seminary Hill Road, probably, what are those, 3 Victorians that are up the road. I've been a resident of Putnam County for 20 years, and I've been there. We moved in when Guidepost was there, and they were always a good neighbor. Paladin Center is also a good neighbor. Couple of concerns, same as Barbara, which is the whiskey fungus. I do have a couple of questions with regards. First, I want to say thank you for the thorough explanation that they gave tonight. I have a couple of questions about the discrepancy in number of employees, because he mentioned today 60, and then I think somewhere in the paperwork there was like 400 or something.
We can respond to that. What I've known about that is they mentioned 100 today, 60 on any given time, potential growth someday up to 400. I heard today 500 in the U.S., but let them come back.
Okay.
Let them come back and respond to
Okay.
that.
The second thing is, since we've been there, the Guidepost facility has always been like a community gathering spot for parades. Like this weekend, we walked down the road and we watched the beginning of the Medal of Honor parade. So I wanted to understand whether or not they would still be open to community activities, things like that, because that's a big thing. we used to have the firemen's parade there, and, you know, people would just go there and watch all of that. The last thing is that in the paperwork, it also says that in 2020, there's going to be some expansion of increased production. And my question is from a wastewater perspective and from the town infrastructure perspective. Do we have the capacity, or who is going to pay for the increased infrastructure needs?
So if there is additional growth at another time, 2020, 2021, they would have to come forward in front of the board again to discuss with Mike and the consultants over there, Rich, the water use, the waste, the traffic, any changes to what we approve or don't approve would have to come back in front of the board. Just
Okay.
so you know that. If we grant this conditionally, nothing can change to that without them coming in front of all you and us again, correct? Mike?
Nothing beyond what you approve. So if they decided to go a little less, that would be okay, but more would not be okay.
Okay. So then the last comment I had to do with water. So they're anticipating a minimum of 5 wells. And I believe the, person said that he's looked around and there weren't any wells around. But my concern really has to do with the homeowners, because there are some homeowners that have wells. And I have a lot of questions or concerns about what if we have a drought. We've had droughts. I remember when we first moved up here, we had a drought in the summer. What happens then? You know, how do we handle it?
And we can ask Henry to come back up after. We'll do that.
Okay. Those are the only questions that I have right now. And I just need to tell you, I'm not against business. I actually work for a very large industrial gases company, but this is my home, and we've been here for 20 years, and we love it.
Are you on a well?
We have a well, yes.
Okay.
I'm not on it, but I have it.
Oh, okay. But your water supply comes from?
This,
Municipal
up the hill,
water.
yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
supply.
Thank you.
Hi, Lori Kemp. I live on Mechanic Street off Seminary. When I first heard about this project, I thought, oh, great, that sounds like fun. Then, of course, like anything else, you look into it and you start seeing all the negatives. My biggest concern is the whiskey fungus. It supposedly goes to a mile. That's pretty much the whole hamlet of Carmel, the plaza. And in that area, there's 3 sites on the National Register of Historic Places. So they would be subject to this fungus growing. I also am concerned about the water. And I know that they said that they would dig wells, but my understanding of hydrology at the location of that project is that they would be digging wells in the aquifer and water table of Lake Oneida, wouldn't they? So that's a concern. And I don't know, I'm sort of curious about the odors. You know, I've heard that it creates an odor. What does it smell like? Regards to wastewater, the sewer treatment plant now occasionally smells, if you're in the plaza. And so with the increased use, will it smell more? And so that was a concern. And the cost of upgrading it at the end of the second phase when they go into like full production or whatever. It was mentioned that we will need to upgrade the sewer treatment plant. The grain dust. There's a senior housing development, and on that, it's on the north side of the project, and it has no screening, so some of those people might have respiratory problems, that this grain dust might affect. So maybe they could double up on the screening at that area. And I'm just kind of curious about what's being made that isn't going to require any sort of aging process. And I guess maybe I don't understand alcohol production that much, but it seems like whatever you make would have to age at some, even a couple of days, and it will create ethanol. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Ann Finizzi, and I live in the town. I'm very concerned about perhaps some technical things that perhaps the attorney could clarify for me. I was looking at the code under which this distillery is to be placed, located, and it is the Commercial Business Park Code. As I read the code, it fitted very well the former occupants, such as Guideposts and maybe Paladin, and maybe even restaurants and so forth. But this is a different animal altogether. This is a different industrial use altogether. It has components in it that really do not fit that code. And I would urge this planning board to look very carefully at and I'm not going to go through the components because they can be easily accessed. The second thing, oops. The second thing is that you do have industrial performance standards, and those standards are excellent, really excellent. And I would hope, and from what I could gather from the discussion, is that these industrial performance standards were trying to be adhered to. Again, when I looked at the performance standards, certainly this facility, and I have nothing against the facility itself, but this facility really needs another very careful look because of all the wastewater, the possibility of ethanol emissions, you only have 20 casks, so it probably will not happen. But the gentleman from Tennessee or Kentucky, I think he knows that there was a tremendous wastewater problem in that section, and there was such a fish kill. The entire creek was degraded beyond belief. We have Lake Glenida. That is our focal point of our town. Nothing can happen that in any way degrades, in any way impairs, in any way threatens or imperils that particular area. And he's gone. Mr. Albano is gone, who has spent some time. Now, I looked at Mr. Epstein's fire suppression systems, and what he said was the following. There was an ethanol detection system, which is great, and a link to such a typical detection system. I went to that site. It is it looks like a very good detection system. I would want to know do you have that particular detection system? In addition, you have also a foam suppression system for fires and things of that kind. And again, here it is. A site was given, Vikingssprinkler.com. The other site was Draeger.com, and it said it was the typical. I didn't get the impression that this is the system that was going to be used, but I would hope that it would be. The other thing is, of course, here again, there is a very, very good explanation by Mr. Epstein on the wastewater. And I think the point is more than well taken about the increase in production that is scheduled, according to this paper, 2021 and to 23. So I think all of these raise very, what should I say, concerning questions in my mind. The last concerning question is that I read the papers, I read Mr. Dumas, I read the Putnam Press, any paper that is around, I read. And I'd like to have, what shall I say, a firm idea of just the parameters of this particular development. Is this $100 million or is it $40 million? Is this 400 employees or 102 or 60? What is it? I mean, what is it what I'm dealing with? I don't want to pick up 3 or 4 different papers with the county executive saying one thing, the governor saying another, the paper saying another. I think that's confusing to the public, and I'm sure it may be confusing to you. So let's get the figures, the base figures correct. Is it a 40 million project that's going to be in 2 phases, that we're going to have, by the way, according to the governor and other people, there's supposed to be 102 employees over a 5-year period. Not next year, not the following year, over a 5-year period. Who are these employees? What are their salaries? How are they going to contribute to the economics of our community? And where are they coming from? Because there was an article in the Romanian magazine and in the business that the CEO said that they were going to be 400 employees, many of them Romanians. I said, oh, that's nice. So let's get the basic facts straight. And I was a history major, and I want to know my facts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Alan Darren. I live at 59 Seminary Hill Road, right up the block from the site of the distillery. I just had a few questions that are confusing, like Ann has. One, for the most part, is the visitor center and banquet. I'd just like a clarification. What is a banquet? You know, is it a wedding banquet? Are we going to have weddings there? And that's confusing to me. Visitor center, I'd like to know the hours that the visitors are going to be coming in and out of there. What is the time period for visiting the facility? Other questions I have are, I read through the minutes, the odor quality was addressed, that's emitting from the plant. I didn't understand how far that transmitted, the odors. I know people a mile away are not going to smell it. I live right up the block, within 500 feet of the facility, am I gonna smell it? Am I gonna have a barbecue in my yard and have people over and everyone saying, ugh, what is that smell? I don't know the limits of the smell or the sound. The sound, the same thing. There's no distance in the minutes that say we did it, sound quality, and it's minimal. I don't know what minimal means. Another confusing thing was the trucks going in and out. I don't understand that. There's 4 to 5 trucks a day bringing grain in. Then today you said there's trucks going out bringing waste out, or fermentation waste going out. How many trucks are bringing the alcohol? I hear there's a lot of alcohol gallons being produced per week or per day. How is that? How many trucks is bringing, tanker truck? Is it going in tanker trucks? I don't know how many trucks really, what's going on. So it's a little confusing. Like Ann said, I'm not getting the right. Yeah, every day it's a different thing I read about, and that's a concern of mine. And in the future also, are these trucks going to be, in the future when, the production builds up, how is that going to impact, the trucks? Is there 10 grain trucks coming in, 30 trucks going out with alcohol? I don't know what the capacity of this plant is, which is a major concern. I think that's about it. Sound concerns, a banquet, again, I don't know what a banquet is going to be. I don't know what they mean. Noise from the banquet, are they all going to be on the terrace? Everyone's going to be, are we going to hear that? These are some of the concerns I'd like to have
We'll have them
answered.
addressed. Thank you. Is there other comments that haven't been brought up yet that people still want to speak on? I think we're, third row, we're still in the third row.
Thank you very much, and thank you for providing this opportunity for public comment. And Alexandria Group, thank you for bringing so many experts to the meeting tonight. My name's Stephen Morse. I live at 71 Seminary Hill Road, which is kind of at the top of the hill right next to Arms Acres. I did have a few concerns, some of which have been addressed, such as the odor. I am concerned, along with my neighbor Alan Darren, about the noise that may be coming from any banquets or events that are going to happen at night. Is there going to be a time limit for those events to end? Is it going to be the kind of thing, because we hear the Carmel football games up at our house, and is it going to be another kind of thing where we're going to listen to, I don't mind listening to Carmel football games announcing, but is that going to be one of those things? I'm also a little bit concerned with the Lot 2 assisted living. I saw something about that in the wastewater assessment. Is that something that's kind of on the block to be discussed in the near future? Is this something that Alexandria is involved with, or is this a Herald project that he's going to be moving forward with in the near future?
That is not part of this tonight.
Okay, so that's...
If it does come in front of us, you'll have an opportunity to comment.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I am concerned about property values. Is this going to affect our property values at all going forward up there on the hill? I also have a concern about, is there going to be a turning lane off of Route 6 for the trucks to enter and exit the area there? And, is there, when there are banquet events and there are going to be, I guess they asked for a parking variance to increase the number of parking, are there going to be police officers or safety officers assigned to get the cars in and out quickly and safely from the Seminary Hill?
Excuse me, that was not a variance for parking number. That was to allow the parking on the adjacent lot.
Right, but...
They have the right number, it's just beyond their property line. So they have a perpetual easement agreement between the two parties.
Great. So, but from my understanding, the entrance on Seminary Hill Road is going to be used for banquets. Is that true?
For them to, they'll answer that afterwards.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't.
And that's my concern with a couple hundred cars coming up Seminary Hill Road at a given time and leaving at a given time, where there'll be, safety involved for the people that live on Seminary Hill Road. Thank you very much. That's the end of my questions.
Thank you. I believe we're in the fourth row, yes.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. My name is Brian Gates. I am Vice President of Hudson Valley Economic Development Corporation, 10 Matthews Street, Goshen, New York. First of all, welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the town. Welcome to the state. Welcome to the Hudson River Valley. We submitted a letter of support for the record, so just a few points. We certainly support this project, and we hope you look favorably on the project based on the merits that they've laid out. Beverage alcohol produced by both craft companies, national companies, and now international companies are extremely hot right now, not only in New York State, but also the country. Excuse the pun, this particular project would be a great shot in the arm for the local community. Good jobs, good quality jobs. I appreciate Ann's comments about whether or not they've talked about salaries, et cetera, and I'm sure she wants that cleared up. Beverage alcohol, my experience, I spent 26 years in the business. It's a very high-paying industry. So I believe that they'll answer the questions regarding salaries and jobs. But I think with the state-of-the-art visitor center, premium product that they produce, this is going to be a great partnership and a great story for the town. The state of New York is behind this project financially with their commitment, and we believe the partnership between Alexandrian and the town will be a long-lasting and fruitful one for all. In past planning meetings you've talked about, they've addressed your concerns. Their engineers, their staff, and everyone else involved in this project has done a great job in addressing your concerns. Finally, one of the things they talked about is they had a chance to look at other sites in the state. I'm not sure about the country, but one of the things is that this particular site reminds them of home. Not only the structure, but the view. And I guess, as everyone knows, kind of a happy home is a happy partner. So, again, thank you for your time. I hope you do advance the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Going across that row there, and then it's you, and then him.
Good evening. My name is Christine Neubel. I am representing my mother, 66 Seminary Hill Road. Being a bachelor in chemistry, minor biology, minor in math, I still don't quite catch the engineering involved with this. I've worked for a major oil company, I've worked for a pharmaceutical company, and something doesn't quite wash. The presentation has been, well, we have this many employees, this many off shifts. Well, okay, and nobody on the weekend. As far as I understand, a distillery or a distillation process runs and runs constantly, being, feed coming in here and whatever product comes off the other side. What happens on the weekend? There should be, at least for safety purposes, if this project goes through, a weekend staff, as far as I would see.
Not to speak for them, but I think I did hear 6 or 7 people on a weekend. But let
Off
them
shift,
respond.
that
Right.
was off shift. According to what I heard, it was off shift.
We'll let them respond. But thank you.
Okay. Now, I was born here. I've lived here. I know other people have brought up the dry spell and the drought, but when I was a kid here, we just about every summer had a water restriction, no washing, no watering, and so that is a major, major concern, because how many thousands of gallons and this used? Regardless of the well and tapping into the natural groundwater, because that all affects the balance. You affect the groundwater here, it's pulls off of the different lakes, the other different water reservoirs in the area, and that water, the water reservoirs aren't ours. We might say, oh, that's part of our natural community. Technically, New York State owns that water. That's not our water. Okay, so that is something that environmentally also needs to be addressed. Like someone else mentioned, okay, we got 20 casks here. How do you get, having worked for an oil industry, there's always a leak. No matter how careful you are, there's always a leak. And so once again, you put these things into these big tanker trucks. We just had that Route 6 that was all beautifully paved. All those trucks coming in there, How's that going to be impacted? Like I said, I've lived here all my life through all the potholes and the drain, and along Route 6, coming down off of Church Street, that is a drainage nightmare. Now, there's another question I have. Okay, this lady here brought it up. This is a residential area we're talking about. Guidepost and Paladin Center aside, it's a residential area. Is there not someplace in Pauling, in Kent, that would be a meadow more suited for this? I'm sorry, I don't see it. Again, the effluent smell, the distillation smell, the traffic through the town. Now, there was a mention of the recycled water back to 75% will be recycled. Will that be recycled and then sent off to be towards the sewer plant, or is it to be recycled and used again in the distillation process, thus saving potentially water? Now, I didn't catch this because I didn't catch this at the beginning when this first started being proposed, but does this mean that the Paladin Center no longer exists? It's going to be just all 100% the distillery?
That's correct.
Okay, because I know when the Paladin Center moved in a few years back, we got a lot of helicopters.
It's not going to exist at that location.
Okay, but, so I'm just saying, there's a noise factor no matter what happens, because I know when they did maneuvers and training at the Paladin Center, we got a lot of helicopter noise, and a lot of, between Camp Smith and the helicopters, the maneuvers, we got a lot of noise. Now, that's pretty much what I have. They were talking about the Angel Share. Well, okay, fine. But still, and the fact that it's kind of ironic. You have Arms Acres, a drying out center, up the hill, off of Old Town Road, and down here you have a distillery. All fine and good. You put this pretty center out. You have the urns, the big copper kettles and all. Excuse me, these people, some of them, I'm not sure what the protocol is, but they have day passes. You see them walking into town. I'm sorry. Did somebody not think of this? I'm sorry, I'm done.
Gentleman on the left.
Hi, I'm Ken Ford. I live on Crafts Road, about a mile away as the crow flies. And excuse me. Like many of my neighbors, I was initially very concerned about the mold and also the wastewater. Wastewater concern went away immediately because, let's face it, we got the DEP and the DEC, all these reservoirs in New York City properties. We have the toughest, strictest requirements for wastewater than I think anywhere else in the country. So that concern went away immediately. When I did some research online, I realized there's far more ethanol released from all the homemade wine made in this town in everybody's basement than will be released from this site. So if anyone's concerned about mold, should be looking at the residents making 10, 20 barrels of wine in their basement. This site is not going to cause, that was my biggest concern, and this site absolutely will not cause that problem. What I would like to say is I'm extremely grateful with the consideration these folks have put in trying to maintain the natural beauty of this site, trying to maintain the natural character of this site. We could be faced with some type of ugly industrial building. We could be faced with some type of noisy, smelly manufacturing facility, and we're not. We're faced with a clean, beautiful project that I think 5 and 10 and 20 years from now, we'll all be looking back and saying, these guys were great neighbors. I'd also like to add that, compared to what has been there in the past, far less impact on the community than Guidepost ever was, and certainly less impact than Paladin Center. I'm a gun owner. I have nothing against guns. I support guns, not gun ownership. But the amount of ammunition that gets discharged in that building, noise, if that's not making noise, this type of manufacturing facility is not going to create any noise. I'd much rather see something as beautiful and as considerate as this than what's going on over there now. This is a beautiful site. I think we'll have a great neighbor. I'm in 100% support of this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Bill Trabulsi, Lindy Drive. It's about a driver 7-iron from the location.
How far you hit your 7-iron?
So in no particular order, I'm a small businessman. We have multiple locations. We've been through this scenario quite a bit. Appreciate what you're going through, appreciate what you're presenting. So in no particular order, one of the things that often gets overlooked here is people ask for forgiveness as opposed to permission. And you hear some things that they're pseudo-promising will happen, but may apologize for it not happening. So one of the things is the commercial traffic. Commercial traffic coming, it's proposed that it's all coming off of Route 6. What's the penalty if it's not? Are you policing it? Am I policing it? If it's not being policed, what is the penalty? Okay, so I have a recommendation. I say we put gates on the seminary side of the entrance. So the only vehicles that can enter off Seminary Hill are passenger vehicles. So this will eliminate the, oh, I'm sorry, please forgive me scenario. Because I am not against this at all. Please understand, I'm close and I am not against this. I probably would like it more than I should, but so I am for it, but I'm going to do everything for my community that I can to protect it, to respect it, and to ask these guys to deliver on their promise or pay the price if you don't. The waste product, if it's all going onto Route 6, well, I think it's going to create congestion. I'm okay with it, but I want to prevent it from coming up Seminary Hill. Is it still going to be a pass-through, or is this going to be? See, my thing is, if it's gated, we no longer have a pass-through. People aren't going to be flying up through out onto Seminary Hill. You get a lot of crazy people coming through that Paladin Center right now, jumping onto Seminary Hill. So that would be something I'd like to know about. I apologize. I was writing all this as we were going. So no storage and aging, is that for sure? Is that going to change? Is that something that we are going to know going out a number of years, or is there maybe a proposal 2 years down the road that we should consider? I think we need to know what the long-term desire of this company is, not just the short-term desire. We're all thinking short-term. I'm thinking long-term, okay? As far as leaks, is it all preventable? Can it all be contained? And if it does leak, does the DEC, DEP know about it? Are they okay with what it might do to Lake Lenida? Because you know what happens when stuff goes downhill, and that's where it's going. That's its end. So again, there was some talk about an easement, and this was in the P&Z, and I didn't really understand it, and I don't know if it's something that can be addressed again. So that was something I know we had chatted about, and I'd appreciate that. So as far as wells, there are wells, but I would agree with the gentleman, I think his name was Mr. Boyd, that most of them are not in use up there, but I myself have 2 wells on my property. But I don't use them because we now have town water. But I do have a concern, and I don't know who brought it up, but if there is a drought and the wells run dry, the distillery still needs to run. Where are they going to get their water to run? And what impact will that have on me, us? Maybe there's a contingency, and I hope there is, but it's something that I would like to just kind of, I'd like to know. Okay, so you have a recycle system. I'm very well aware of recycle systems in my business, so I would like to know a little more about that, but maybe offline. Okay, and so basically, really, what are the auditing procedures? Who is going to audit what they're promising to provide us, our community, security measures that what they promise they will deliver on? That's a key one for me. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is one other person in the back.
So once again, the water issue, this is just about every summer growing up, there has been a water shortage. So this is very important that water, everybody talks about, oh, our beautiful lake. That is not our lake. That is a reservoir. It belongs to New York State. So much as it is beautiful, I agree, having grown up here, it is not our water. So if the company realizes that, and if the New York City realizes that they will be drawing on our water, that's a concern. The other thing is, having worked for Exxon, having worked for Danbury Pharmaceutical, nothing is 100%. There is, you can say Alaska, the Gulf, there is nothing that is 100%, okay? The other thing is, while I was working for Danbury Pharmaceutical, there was a very embarrassing case where the company didn't realize that people were smuggling drugs out. Lake Carmel police caught people selling Danbury Pharmaceutical drugs on the street. Low key stuff, but I'm concerned about security. Once again, with Arms Acres being just up the road, I'm concerned about security. All right?
Thank you. There's a gentleman that hasn't spoke yet. And if there's nothing that hasn't already been said, we can go through it. Anyone else that has something to say?
Somebody's notes up here? I'll put them down. All right. Good evening, Planning Board. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak before you. To the Romanian Distillery, thank you for choosing Carmel. So you brought hired some local people to work with you. That's a good sign. Hopefully that continues. Hiring some local people in your new company. I'm happy to see that. I had 4 questions coming in here tonight. I think they were all answered, so I'm not going to revisit them. Obviously, the fungus, the mold issue, I thought your representatives did a good job clarifying some of those issues, and I'm sure our town planner, our town engineer, our town building inspector, the town board, the planning board, everybody here, a town attorney, will evaluate what's being said tonight and look out for the best interests of the town of Carmel. I have confidence in the job that you all do, and I think this is a good project. I think we should support it. I heard the word redevelopment earlier. I've watched for years. By the way, the other issues were water usage, sewer capacity, and traffic. I think they were all addressed, so I'm not going to hit them again because I think that was already stated enough. Redevelopment. Anytime I see projects either before the planning board or zoning board on vacant land, I hear many people come up and say, why don't they just take a pre-existing building and develop it? And they point to all these buildings. Well, we have a situation here where that's exactly what's being done. Redeveloping a building that's currently in existence. I think that's a great thing for this town. I think it's in a great location. As far as noise, I'm a big fan of the Paladin Center, but I live about a mile away as the crow flies, and I used to hear them helicopters, and I can guarantee you one thing. Can't imagine this distillery making any noise close to those helicopters that I would hear coming from Camp Smith and when the police were doing the emergency training there. So I think the issue of noise, I think that's probably will balance itself out. Trucks was an issue because I was reading on the blogs and people going back and forth about comments and talking about there was going to be this amount of trucks, that many. If it's 6 to 8 trucks, I think it's very reasonable. I agree with most of the comments of the people here who had concerns. Those are legitimate questions and legitimate concerns. And I'm sure the planning board, your professionals, and the distillery company hopefully will mediate those issues, and maybe we can all just be happy with this project in the near future. I don't like the scare tactic, the doomsday scenario. I think trying to scare people into thinking something is no good is actually bad. We talk about traffic. I remember Kamada Park years ago. They were building Kamada Park on Seminary Hill Road, and everybody came up with the doomsday scenario about all the traffic. You ain't going to be able to get home. There's going to be cars backed up everywhere. Kamada Park is, like I call it, the Central Park of the town of Carmel now. It's a beautiful park. I don't think there's really no issues with it. People go in and out. I don't see no traffic jams. I'm up there often, and but scare tactics are often used to try to prevent projects from moving forward, and I just don't think it's a good tactic. I think facts are better. And talk about economic development. You know what? Danbury, Westchester, and Dutchess County, they're eating our lunch every day. You go over the borderline in Dutchess County, got development everywhere. They're open to development. They're promoting it. They're trying to steal it from Putnam if they can. Go down Route 6 into Somers. You got a major development boom going on over there. You guys see it. You ride down it every day. It's unbelievable. Go to Danbury. You see all the New York license plates. I want to see some good businesses in Putnam County and the town of Carmel. I'm asking you to make sure that when businesses come in, you just do your due diligence. You just do what I guess you've been charged to do as a planning board. I have faith in you. I know most of you. I've watched you on TV. I know you love what you do, and I know you care about this community. I know you're not just going to allow something to come in that's going to hurt the town of Carmel. I really do have faith in all these. I want to tell you that. I want to look you in your eyes and tell you all, I know you do a good job. I'm one of them nuts that sit home and watch the planning board, the zoning board, the town board, and I respect the time, effort, energy you put into it, and I really do believe you and the professionals here care about this town. We need life. We need life in this town. We are becoming, unfortunately, an aging town. Our student population is going down by about 25%. Everybody's trying to push economic development out when we should be bringing them in. We talk about our taxes. We complain about our taxes year in and year out. We yell at the elected officials. And then when we got economic development trying to come in, maybe it'll soften the blow. Realistically, it won't lower our taxes, but maybe it'll prevent it from going from 3%, maybe it'll go to 1%. Sometimes you have hidden benefits of things that you don't realize. Maybe you will get a 0% tax raise. All right? We all know taxes are not going down, but can we keep them where they're at? And I think a start with a good company like this that's going to create jobs. And again, I see on the blogs they're saying, oh, they're bringing in the Romanians, like the Romanians are bad people. I welcome you. I really appreciate the fact that you chose the town of Carmel to bring your business. So I believe it's a great thing for this town. And I would encourage you to look at your business plan and try to make sure that you do hire some local people and you create job opportunities for the people in the community who maybe will be burdened with some of the issues that were presented tonight. And jobs would be helpful for us in this town. So I'll say this to the planning board, but I know they're here, but I don't want to put my back to the planning board. But I'm also speaking to the distillery. We would like to see some jobs in our town. They can't guarantee that to the board, but as a business, doing business in our town and wanting to be good neighbors and a welcoming business to our town, I just think they should think about that as they do it. As far as a lot of the other concerns, you got traffic, you got the Department of Transportation. As far as water and other issues and environmental stuff, we got some of the toughest restrictions in the country with the DEC and DEP over here. And if we're so concerned about our water, as we should be, you can rest assured no one's going to sit back, neither are any of these professionals over here, and going to allow a company to come in and siphon out our water, or deal with the issue of sewer capacity, which I heard mentioned a little earlier. And it's a legitimate question. And maybe the governor wants to support this project, the county exec supports it. See Susie McDonough in the back here. I know the town board supports it. Jonathan Snyder and John Lupinacci were here earlier, but maybe it's time. It's not the distillery's not going to do it, but maybe we do need to expand the sewer capacity over there. Maybe it's time to negotiate with the state to see if they can come in and play a role in helping out with that. I want to make sure I got all my issues before I sit down. I think for the most part, I think that's it. I think somebody brought up people coming out of the, I guess there's a rehabilitation center up there, I forget the name of it, but they said they get day passes. Well, those people do get day passes. They go to Putnam Plaza, there's liquor stores there. If they go to Route 6 in Mayapack, there's liquor stores there. There's bars there. So just because you get a day pass and you're walking by a distillery doesn't mean you're going to walk in and start siphoning alcohol out of a distillery tank. You have bars and liquor stores down the street. So let's be a little realistic about that, I just think. And then somebody said, why don't they go to Paulding or Kent? There's big land and stuff up there. Please stay in Carmel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, before I ask the consultants to respond, is there any other, please?
I would like to have them, Alan from 59 Seminary Hill Road. Backup power, Carmel has a lot of blackouts, power outages. I didn't see anything in the minutes that was addressing, generators on site to keep the plant. Will the plant shut down? Will it stay open? Will there be, backup generators in place to operate? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Nina Walters, tax incentives. I'd like to have a better understanding of what tax incentives they're getting and at what point they will be paying their full share of the taxes.
Okay. I'm not sure anything's been discussed on that, but we'll make a note of it. Anything else before I turn it over to the distillery folks? I'm sorry, no one else will be able to hear.
Is this the final public hearing on this, or are you planning to keep it open?
I'm planning on making this a final one unless there's something that, something changes. There's some reason to keep it open. We'll see how the responses come, if the responses are satisfactory or not, and we'll discuss it with the board.
Okay, and are you permitting written comments after a certain date to be?
Tonight was the public hearing.
Yes, I understand. In the town of Southeast, what happens is that you have a public hearing, and then what is also permitted is that written comments, in case, sometimes you're at a public hearing and all of a sudden something else comes up, but written comments are accepted like a week later, 10 days later, a month. In fact, I went to a planning board meeting Monday night, and the comment period was extended an entire month. It's very unusual that is done, but the comment period, written comment period would be extended. And in the secret process, my understanding is the following, is that the developer or the person that is proposing the project has to respond in writing to the questions that were being asked, not just, communicating back and forth. So perhaps the attorney can clarify that.
You're not in Southeast.
I beg your pardon?
You're not in Southeast.
No, but the secret process extends throughout the state. It's not only the town.
If the board wants to close the
Yeah,
public
I mean,
hearing tonight, they have the right
I'm suggesting the written comments I'm suggesting that the developer has then the opportunity to respond to the written comments, so that we have a written record of it, because they were very important points, and there are other points that could be made. I mean, the whole issue of economic development and so forth, whatever.
Do you
Okay?
have any comments on the written?
So what I think Ms. Finizzi is speaking to is an environmental impact statement. Seeker requires written responses to an environmental impact statement. We're not dealing with an environmental impact statement in this instance. So the obligation is for the applicant to address the issues. They may be able to address them verbally this evening, depending on if there are anything that's beyond the scope of our conversation tonight. It may require a written response, but
We have not even heard from the consultant.
We
We
have
have not
not.
heard from the distillery folks yet. I think we
Right.
ought to give them a
It-
chance to
oh.
respond to all our questions tonight, and
Right, I
yeah.
understand.
And this is taped for, you know.
No, I understand. I just want to ask you, wasn't there a short form made of the environmental impact statement?
you're confusing two elements of seeker, so
No, I'm not confusing it,
you
but
are.
I'm just,
So
I'm
there is
just
no
thinking,
environmental impact statement involved in this application. They've submitted an environmental.
there was none?
There was none. There was an environmental assessment form that's been provided by the
The
applicant.
form, yes.
That's the
Okay.
distinction, correct. You
Oh,
got it.
I see what you're saying, okay. Oh, yeah,
Yep, you got it.
Forgive me, yeah, right. But I still would like to suggest that perhaps you might, what shall I say, give more latitude to this.
Let's hear the team speak, and then we'll take. So I'd like to, I'm sorry?
Hi, my name is Marcel Laviano. I live on Hickory Bend Road. I'm not a chemist or anything, and I'm sure you guys aren't chemists either, or industry experts in the distillation process. I know that the people here did a good job in explaining about the fungus and how it's not an issue because it only happens in the storage process. But I don't know. I mean, maybe there's some ethanol released during the fermentation process, and the gentleman here mentioned something about the scrubbers. What do scrubbers do? I mean, does it just get rid of the mold? Does it get rid of anything else? I guess the point that I'm getting at is that we know, is the town doing anything to vet these claims? Like, do you guys have an analyst or an expert on your side, you know, that's going to look into these claims and making sure that the fungus issue isn't actually going to be an issue? And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Robert Buckley again. Attended a lot of different town board meetings in different towns. Pretty familiar with the process. And again, I think you do a great job. This is not Southeast. I'd be careful walking yourself into a precedent that you're going to open up for the future, and you're going to create a situation where everyone's going to want to get a 30, 45-day extension for. And the problem with those is, for the comments, is the problem with those is they hurt the company coming in. It's time-consuming, and it's very costly to them. You guys advertised a public hearing tonight. I put on my calendar, I'm here. And if I couldn't make it, I would have sent you an email, I would have wrote you a letter. I think you'd be making a mistake to change your practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I address the
Please.
public as well? My name is Harold Lepler. I'm a resident of Putnam. I'm a principal at Hinckley Holding as the owner of this property, the Guidepost facility, for approximately 8 years. Several questions, including the lady in front, if I can address specifically questions you raised. What will the landscape on Seminary Hill Road look like with this development? and issue of landscaping, existing tree and shrub coverage, and those that have to be replaced. We've had some storm damage in this last year. I've had a private company in that has removed trees that have been uprooted with a storm or that have fallen, either disease or from the storm, with the exception of one tree, which is on order for them to complete. The area of Seminary Hill Road, and when we first did this some years ago, we met with every homeowner on Seminary Hill Road when we acquired this property. We've tried to be respectful neighbors. Okay. The entire frontage from the second driveway all the way beyond the single-family home that's on this property, we created a covenant, a deed restriction in perpetuity that goes beyond anything they're doing, and it's a recorded document, that there'll be no building, no development on that entire front lot, all that frontage. I wouldn't have stood up if you hadn't asked the question. Trees that we've had removed, we've had stump grinding done on, there were large trees that came down, and to be replanted. Your replanting season is the fall. Since we've owned the property, we've maintained the landscaping. One other lady in the audience, and I believe behind you, asked the question about some of the more public events that have occurred, okay? There's been a lot of parades. There's been a lot of community meetings, conferences that have occurred on this property over those 8 years. We've sponsored it. We've taken no money at any time from any of the groups. There is I don't know if someone's in the audience tonight on behalf of the soccer and the lacrosse group. I'm cutting the grass. We've provided that. We cover the insurance. We've never asked for anything. I wouldn't have come up, my kids were born in Carmel, my wife taught in this school system, and that's a few years back, okay? We've tried to quietly be good neighbors. The SPCA has been in the building. They're a not-for-profit. They've paid no rent, okay? The Civil Air Patrol with 80 to 100 kids has been there. There has been health providers that deal with our senior citizens, our veterans, and others in need that the county didn't have space for. They've all been tenants in this building. Quietly, the building department has inspected and seen what's going on. They've applied, they've done everything openly. Paladin came to us with the concept of a Homeland Security Training Center. They needed help. They needed a home. They needed financial help. This followed 9/11. They do interoperability exercises with town, county, state, federal government. Other than a contribution towards real property tax, we've supported them from day one. I wasn't going to say that because there's some things you don't talk about. Paladin's going to find a new home, and the county is going to have a new training center for all first responders. A dedication, a deed. It's before the legislature. It's a donation. It's not a sale. There's no quid pro quo. I had something to do with that. Paladin should find a home as well. Just questions you asked about traffic. These gentlemen have heard this from day one from me. And the traffic is, their truck traffic is 6 to 8 the population, when we had Guideposts, we probably had 100 trucks and 600 employees. The differential, and they should respond regarding their employees, they will have employees out of Carmel in other areas as they expand their corporate business. It's not inconsistent, it just needs an explanation. And they've been totally responsible in bringing in some quality people to address the conservation of water, the recycling, if you will. We've asked them to address the issues of wastewater so that they don't put a burden on the community now or in the future. They've been responsible in every request. They've never said no. We've waited 8 years to find a company that was responsible to bring in. We've said no to other companies that wanted to locate here because we felt it wasn't appropriate or defensible. We feel this is. And if I can respond to any other questions, Mr. Chairman and the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Randy Tharp again. I'll ask a couple of our representatives to come up and address some of these questions. I've tried to sort of catalog these a little bit so that we can get one person to come up. I probably will direct them as to what questions I've got them to address. And so hopefully we can have one come up at a time, address all of those questions related to their subject matter, and then
terrific
respond. So regarding some of the employee count questions, investment questions, Romanian worker questions, other things, Stelios Saba.
Hello again. First of all, thank you all for coming and sharing with us your concerns. We hope that we will address everything now. So I will only deal with the level of investment. The initial investment that will be for this specific building here is around $40 million. $100 million is the total investment in all US that the company is planning to make over the course of the foreseeable future. And as far as employees, 60 employees will be based in Carmel in the course of the next 5 years. 102 is the total number of employees in New York State, and 400 employees are the total number of employees in all US in the course of the next 5 years. Now, with regards to the Romanian employees that you mentioned, of course, we don't want to have any discrimination on nationality on any employee that we are hiring in United States. But the intention here is to build a US distillery to produce US products, and we want US workforce to support this operation. We already have our first United States colleague here, and he's here with us. We are planning to build a full United States team based in United States. So I will let the experts deal with all the other questions.
Thank you.
I have a number of them that I will address first, related a little bit to some of the site access issues or questions, and also traffic. Currently, there are 3 access points to the site. Again, we've preferred and had focused Route 6 to be the commercial access. It's really kind of impossible to necessarily direct everybody. All trucks will be directed to that. We would probably need to make some changes to the other entrances, but I don't think that's really possible. It's not in the plans that have been presented as such. But all trucks would be through there. I appreciate the point about traffic that actually goes from Route 6 to Seminary. And actually, that is a great thing that you brought that up, because it's something we will look to address in terms of possibly speed bumps or something, because we wouldn't want people cutting through the site with having workers and our traffic and cars there. But because I wasn't aware that was something that would occur. But we would be directing traffic. And again, the number of trucks is only 6 to 8. There'll be a variety of types of trucks. There may be some tankers. The waste that's removed, the solid waste, is really grains. If you think of wet oats, it's basically wet oats that have had the water squeezed out of them. And because the process is looking to extract the sugars out of those that are used in the fermentation process. So that's really all it is. All those trucks by state law have to have covers, appropriate covers, and coverage over them when they leave the site. Grain trucks, and I'll have Alan address the issue of how the grain is delivered and dust control for that.
Since you're discussing traffic, so there was a question on someone's coming to a tasting or to the banquet facility, where would that access be?
Would be directing them to Route 6, from Route 6.
Okay.
To try to enter at that. I mean, again, that's the main thoroughfare. You know, people, whatever they end up Googling, they'll probably decide if they're the first time there, they'll come however, maybe they get directions. But trying to get people off of Route 6 because it is a state route, state highway, and has traffic control on it at other points is probably a better location.
I don't think we would want you to close the Seminary Hill roadside like they were requesting. A fire truck needs to get in there.
Fire truck access,
I don't
absolutely.
want.
We also, there's an easement to provide access to other portions of the site that have now been subdivided from the original site. So access from Seminary Hill Road is required to provide access to other portions of the overall site, prior site. Try to go through my points here. Harold mentioned the trees and the things he's done. In terms of the trees, we have not done a full assessment of the existing landscaping and things like that, but we would take care of anything that's there that clearly causes a hazard or is unsightly. Our plan, as you can see from the drawings, is to beautify the site and make it a pleasant place to be and make an enhancement. That hasn't been submitted at this point for all of that, because again, full assessment of what the existing landscape condition is and what would do. So we've been looking at keeping it and maintaining it, but we would look to make improvements over time for that. Excuse me, I'm just going through the list to try to make sure I cover the points that I've got my name addressed to here. Aging of the product, we mentioned that there is no aging going to be taking place, that the cask storage that will only be mostly for the visitor experience to see casks or possibly taste samples from the casks. The reason being is that the plan is to have cask storage off-site. So the casks will be filled on-site and then stored off-site. For products like gin, vodkas, those products don't need to be aged. So they'll be bottled and then shipped out from the site. We actually, within the warehouse area, we don't have enough capacity for storage. Also, want to get the product out to get it sold, especially the gin and vodka products. Once they're bottled, they're ready to be on the shelf. We don't really want them sitting in a warehouse collecting dust. We want them out someplace in a store or retail location to be sold. Let's see. The leak detection system, these are part of requirements from a process standpoint. So the tanks, outside ethanol storage tanks, will have leak detection on them. The containment is required by codes, fire protection codes, as well as the foam fire suppression system. So the fire suppression system, probably saw on the website, it was actually an aircraft hangar, which is typical where those are used because of the jet fuel and other things, and it has to cover a large space in a short time. But basically, that's the same type of system. In this case, it would fill a containment area and also have a hose or be able, so the firefighters can direct that foam to suppress an alcohol fire. And again, that will be designed to meet all National Fire Protection Association requirements, and also that whatever the local fire department requires for it. The hours for the visitor center have not been fully determined, but basically we're talking daytime hours. Probably not necessarily all 5 weekdays. There'll probably be a day or two when those are off. Most all visitor center distillery tours are typically by pre-appointment only. Most all of the distilleries not sure in the New York area. I know if you're going to Kentucky or Tennessee and you want to go to one of the distilleries, you got to buy a ticket in advance online for that and make an appointment to visit those. So generally, that's probably the way the operation will be set up here. And there will obviously probably weekend hours would be maybe from 10 till 6, 5 or 6 in the afternoon. Reasonable hours. We don't expect tours will probably be no more than 15 to 20 people within a tour group. A tour will probably take an hour, so you're probably not going to have more than 2 or 3 tours at a time. So we don't expect any more than maybe, say, 75 to maximum 100 visitors, people, and that's not necessarily cars. Usually people aren't coming solo to go through a distillery tour. So we're not expecting volumes and volumes of traffic. Events that would be held here would be more or less corporate events, even community events that would utilize the facility, indoor facility, possibly also the terrace. We have noise ordinance that we have to maintain and abide by. That's the case for if somebody has a bar or restaurant and an outside space, or if you have a party at your house. We'll be maintaining and abiding by those same zoning ordinances in regards to sound. From the site and the operation itself, there really is no sound generated. I think probably the most sound you'll hear will be the required traffic required beepers that are going to be on the back of a truck as they're backing up to a truck dock. But that's generally all the sound that's generated. There are fans on the cooling towers, but those will be screened and generally sound shielded. Also, their location is such that we don't believe that's going to make much of a migration off the site. Clearly, they won't generate as much noise as helicopters flying over the site. So,
emergency
have addressed leak containment. Sorry?
A question was raised about emergency power generators.
Yeah, I'm going to have Alan address that in terms of what's. Harold? Oh, you wanted to talk about the easement? Okay. No, that's fine.
I'll apologize. We asked them, when we started this process, to provide for full access on the interior circulation that exists for now and in the future for all first responding vehicles, those police, ambulance, or fire. And that applies to the residents that are immediately next to it. If there was a situation on Seminary Hill Road or right up at the area where Lakeland Ida is, they can come through the property, first responders at any time, to do what they have to. And there was a question on landscaping, and I'll apologize for having forgotten. We have created a conservation restriction, and it varies in areas, but minimally it's between 50 and 100 feet around the entire perimeter of this property, and 100 feet or better for our neighbors on Seminary Hill Road. We weren't asked to do that. And on the plan that this board previously looked at, and this gentleman was at the meeting, we provided on that original office approval very significant landscaping to be put in by the development to shield our neighbors. And I apologize, but they're not quite aware of that history, and I just thought I'd respond to it.
Okay, I think to cover a number of these other ones, I'm going to have Alan Anderson come up and address some of the issues related to the process. And particularly, there was a number of comments or thoughts or questions about smells and odors from the process, and also the number of wells that we would have. There was a question on that, and I think also grain dust and workers. Yeah, no, it's okay. If you want.
The smells generated by a distillery are actually very pleasant. We use organic raw materials that you would use in your kitchen, so it's wheat, flour, rye, barley, and water and yeast. So if you're baking bread, that's the kind of smell you get. But what we've engineered in is traps in each of the process vessels. So you'd have a P-trap or a U-trap with a water seal. And that would be designed to release any pressure, but within normal process conditions, keep the smells in. Any of the distillation pots or the columns will have a vent condenser. So basically there is no release of ethanol into the atmosphere. If I'm losing alcohol, I'm losing yield and we're losing money, and it's basically the distillery personnel's job to monitor that we make 400 litres of alcohol per tonne of raw materials, and that's closely monitored. So I think that covers smells. The number of wells, we did a dowsing survey just recently, and the lady who carried out the traditional way of finding wells in Scotland earmarked 5 locations that we could potentially drill wells. And we've sort of established that 2 of the wells, or the 2 of the well locations, would be more than enough for the water supply for the whole distillery. Grain dust. Grain dust, when you move wheat or corn, you generate dust. So that's from discharge from the grain truck into the intake pit, any of the conveyors, and any of the process equipment and the silos. So what we've engineered in is an aspiration system. So it's just like a vacuum cleaner. There's a slight vacuum on all the equipment internals, pulling the dust off. It's captured in a dust bag system and returned back to the process. So for every tonne of dust that I save, I get 400 litres of alcohol, and it's not in my interest to disperse it into people's lungs. For manning at the weekend, there will be generally a distillery. I've worked in several distilleries. Some are fully automated, run 24/7, 365. The last project I was on ran 24/5, and it was off on a Saturday morning and restarted on a Monday morning. During the weekends, there was engineering staff in carrying out essential maintenance. There'll be 24/7 security staff constantly on site. And there'll be probably 1 or 2 weekend shift members. So effectively, the site is manned 24/7. I think I've addressed the security will be the full security team 24/7. I'd also like to address whiskey mould. The whiskey mould is an opportunist moss or bacteria, and it eats ethanol. So if you remove the source of food, you won't have any moss. And for that reason, we are not maturing on the site. So typically, in the first year, we would probably fill about 50,000 casks. If you keep each cask for 10 years, we'll have 500,000 casks. Each cask in its first year will lose 4%, and then 2% of the volume thereafter for every year. That's the food for the moss. If the food is not there, there is no moss. I've worked in 2 distilleries of similar size. One was Loch Lomond Distillers, right in the centre of Alexandria in Scotland. They had warehousing on site, had 50 warehouses containing, say, 100,000 casks, and there was a major problem with whiskey moss. My last project was the Great Northern Distillery in the centre of Dundalk in Ireland. It was a 6 million LA plant, and we did not mature on site. There was no whiskey moss. So that was right in the centre of a town. Houses, pubs, everywhere. And there was nothing there. I think that's the questions that I have to address. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Henry, I have a question like that, ask your expertise on, because there were some questions about wells, wells running dry, all those types of things, maybe that you can lend some of your expertise on.
Okay, all water comes from rain, no matter if it's to fill Lake Glenida or fill the wells we drill. The rain comes, it purifies, goes down through the ground, runs through the brooks into the lakes, and soaks into the ground and purifies through the soils, gets into the bedrock and flows through cracks in the rock. So, yes, is there a drought? When a well is 200 or 300 feet or deeper, droughts really don't affect them so much. It's the first 100 feet of water level. I mean, if that 100 feet was affected down 200 feet, we'd end up having to leave because Lake Glenida is only 50 or 60, people say it's bottomless, but it's 50 or 60 feet deep. So if my wells went down 200 feet and they're basically on the same level as your lake, we'd all have to leave town because there would be no water. Yes, there's conservation periods that go on where the problem is people start watering and watering and watering. And in a normal household, you only use, for engineering purposes, maximum 100 gallons per person per day. Average family is 5 people, 500 gallons a day. You'd only use about 2/3 of that. But when you start to water a lawn, you're running 10 gallons a minute for 6 hours, and that's thousands of gallons of water. This is why you have water restrictions when you have a drought going on. So these people are going to be a steady flow coming out. They're going to be recycling a lot. They're not drawing a lot of water out of the ground, and there is nobody else around there to affect. Now, the people that have wells up there that aren't using them, those wells should be properly abandoned because that's just a big hole in the ground for contamination to get in. And today, if they ran city water past your house, they make you abandon those wells because sooner or later, a fuel tank will leak next to that well, it gets in the ground, and you start to pollute the ground in your area. So those people should consider abandoning the wells. And that lady with the old house, her well is probably this big around. It's probably a danger for people falling in it because people put a wooden top on them, and 20 years from now, a kid plays on top, and next thing you know, we have a disaster. So all those wells should be filled in properly. Nothing to do with these people, but that's the right thing to do for the ecology of the area. What else do you have to say? What are the questions? That was it? Okay. Yeah, but we're not going to affect anybody else's, anything else. The only thing I would say is, Kenny Schmidt and I talked about wells, drilling wells around Lake Glenida because you buy the water from the DEP, and Kenny Schmidt wanted me to tell me where to drill so we could tap out the water from Lake Glenida before it got there. That would cut your water bill right in half. So while we're drilling up there, you never know. We might hit that mother lode up there, and everything could be renegotiated.
Now that that's on the record, okay.
So anyway, we don't know where that mother lode is. So, but if it happens to happen, we'll renegotiate. So take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to summarize just a couple of things on water and wastewater that were brought up and questions, clarify some of the comments that Seamus made, maybe a little less technical, but basically the process and the technology that we're using, just because there was a question brought up about this as to whether the recycling is actually recycling and then going into the wastewater system, or if it's going back into the process. It's actually going back into the process. So we're planning on bringing water from the wells, some supplemental water from the city, and then the third source is wastewater that comes out of the process that we're treating to basically be pretty much drinkable water again, and treating it to the level that we can put it back into the process and use it for the process as opposed to using fresh water, be it out of the well or be it from the city. So that recycling is taking that into account. We have a wastewater treatment facility, and most communities do. Most communities' wastewater treatment facilities treat it to a state level, as required by the state, required by the EPA, and then it goes into a waterway, river, or stream. Some town down the street, down the river, down the stream, actually intakes some of that water, then treats it to a cleanliness standard to be able to have and put back in as a potable water system. So we're doing very similar to that, actually to a technology level and probably to a level that's higher than what the city or municipal wastewater treatment plant is putting in for our recycling process. So we're basically creating it, putting it back into drinking water. There was a question raised about whether people view it as pollutants or whatever in our wastewater. Our wastewater needs to meet the same standard that everyone's house wastewater meets. So whatever you flush down your toilet, when you do your dishes in the sink, and that water goes down the sink, whatever you put in your drains, we're meeting the same standard as that. So our pretreatment facility will clean the water to the same level as what comes out of your house, and quite frankly, it's going to be cleaner, and it will not have the smell that your house has, other than that portion which comes from the toilets and facilities that we have in our plant. So generally, our production wastewater is generally cleaner water, does not carry odorous and the biologicals that household waste and domestic waste carries.
If I may, just on that point, I wanted to make one clarification, just had to clarify. It was stated earlier that the residual waste from your treatment process, the solids and things that the membranes and process are removing, are not going out with the wastewater to our facility. They're being handled separately by truck disposal. That's what I heard correctly.
Correct.
Thank you.
The waste sludges will be removed, and as you know, the waste sludges are valuable for use for fertilizers and other components and other industries. So we'll be selling those very much the same way. All of the, it's called draff, which is the waste mash, the grains after the sugars have been extracted. Those will be sold for animal feed. All of this is as I mentioned, and as Alan just mentioned, everything that goes in is things you would use to be making bread. Especially if you're a sourdough person, it's basically the same process. You're creating a sourdough mixture, except you're going to take, instead of letting the alcohol evaporate off of your sourdough, you're going to be capturing it, we're going to be capturing it and turning it into ethanol. So basically it's a very natural process. There's chemistry involved in that natural process. There's chemistry involved in the wastewater treatment, but they're all proven technologies. We have books and books of codes and standards we have to meet. And in that final design and engineering, we will need to meet those and satisfy Mike and other people in the authorities. Thank you.
Thanks.
I want to give the public an opportunity to respond once more to something that has not been addressed.
I know there's been lots of talk about traffic, and the gentleman back there said, oh, yes, the other counties, the other towns are eating up all the industry. Have you tried to get through Baldwin Place recently? The traffic backs up all the way to Yorktown on one end, and because the way the lights are on, off, it's a nightmare. I go through 6N, or I go along 118, depending on what part of Yorktown I need to get past. Already, coming up off the highway, going up the hill, past the plaza, up the hill, sometimes it takes 5 minutes to get up the hill if it's the wrong part of the afternoon. Now, if you have a lot of left-turning trucks, I don't know what it's going to turn into. And the third thing is, I don't know if everybody here is aware, but during the winter, or if it was just because of the previous tenants, during the winter, that ramp going up there, it's a grade like this, is always closed. It's not plowed, it's always closed. So I don't know if they are going to be delivering and taking product away year round, 365 days, how they're going to get those big trucks off of that road, because it is a pretty good grade. And I know in the past, even as kids, when we would take that as a detour, walk down to the plaza, go to the movie theater, when there were still movies in the plaza, you nearly took your life into your own hands. So I don't know if that is closed in the wintertime in the past for just they didn't want to be bothered, or if it was because it was not manageable. Thank you.
Any comments from the board?
I actually have a couple of comments. I want to thank everyone for their for the responses and for coming out to tonight's public hearing. I think a lot of you had a lot of valid points, and I think we all want to look to be good neighbors. I think this is a beneficial project for our community. And I think, Mr. Travolsi, you said something that I liked. It's called promises and forgiveness. And with that, we want to think ahead. And I think that's what a lot of the residents here are concerned with, is thinking ahead. One of them being the traffic on Route 6. The plans for that. It is a high traffic area. How is that going to be affected? Making left-hand turns, it is a problem in that area. So that's one thing. The other thing is, this is a wonderful experience, a wonderful opportunity for Carmel, Mahopac, to bring in tourism. And I think that is something that's highly needed in our area. However, we need to think of our community and our residents. And I understand that you have your experts for this distillery, which you absolutely need. But we want to keep in mind resident jobs as well. You have a banquet center, a community center. Is that center going to be run by residents? Is it going to be run by your own staff? That's something that I think some of the residents are questioning, and we'd like to elaborate. Maybe you can elaborate more on it.
A lot of discussion about the target of this business, because for us it can be very easy to go to any part of US to build, or any part of the world we can build this distillery, we can build it in any part of the world and we can do it. We take the decision to come here to US, and especially to New York, because we want to use it for the export. Okay, so we are going to build an American company with staff American. So the top management of the groups, the Alan, the group distiller, he take care of 4 countries, be included US. So will be supervisor of the business will be the top management of the holding. Me, like chairman and founder of the business, my CEO, but US, they will have a separately CEO, they have full staff, will be American citizen, because we built American business and we will make range of American products. So all our whiskey will be American products, done from the New York. The gin, the vodka, everything will be American, and will go around the world to export this product. So we cannot bring one Romanian citizen or Bulgarian citizen to sell American product in Japan. Okay? So let's to finish with this discussion. We talk about, we started with the first employee is Stephen here. They can share with you his experience last 3 months. He was visiting also Europe, see our business. So again, will be American company with American staff to control this business around the world. Will be controlled by the top management, will be around 5, 6 people who take care of the holding around the world, not just all US. So Alan, example, they have business in Romania, we have business in Scotland, and in Brazil and US. So we'll be here maybe a few days per month. I think let's to finish with this about to bring people abroad or not. We will be everything American. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Crudy, and I'm very proud to be U.S. employee #1 for the Alexandrian Group. More importantly, I'm very proud to be a lifelong resident of upstate New York. I lived in a small town called Owego, which is 30 minutes south of Ithaca, which is in the heart of another craft beverage industry you may have heard of, the New York wine industry. Has anyone been to the Finger Lakes? Any visit any of the wineries? Show of hands. Has anyone been to the Long Island Wine Trail? It's a beautiful area, isn't it? Could you believe that there are over 450 wineries in New York State right now? Think about that impact. That is a massive impact in terms of use of local natural products. Something that is very much supported by our governor, by New York State in that development. On that note, distilling is already here in the Hudson Valley. We're not first. There are currently 18 distilleries operating today in Hudson Valley. I could just name a few. Black Dirt Distillery in Warwick, Dennings Point Distillery in Beacon, Hudson Valley Distillers in Claremont, Port Chester, there's one, Tuttletown Spirits in Gardner, which our company represents actually in Romania. We're selling their whiskey today in Romania. But just to speak in general terms, just about the wine industry, and I mention the wine industry because before coming to Alexandrian, I worked 8 years for a family-owned winery on Seneca Lake called Hazlitt Vineyards. If anyone likes sweet wine, you've probably heard of Red Cat. But in any case, there are over 100 wineries just on the perimeter of Seneca Lake alone. There's over 200 in the Finger Lakes, and altogether, the New York State wine industry in 2017 directly produced $5 billion in sales from the production of a natural product using local resources. When you add together all of the ancillary businesses that support that industry, meaning packaging, grape growers, finance, restaurants, all of the businesses that benefit from having those wineries in the local towns, you're talking a huge economic impact that is supporting the local economy, and that is exactly what we're doing. We talk a lot about we're going to produce American products for sale throughout the United States and export throughout the world. Yes, that's true, but we're also going to be producing products made in New York State. And that's very important because when we go before New York State, they're asking the question, are you using local ingredients? Because to receive certain tax benefits, we have to use a very high proportion of made in New York products. So not only are we going to benefit, but local farmers are going to be benefiting from the use of local corn, barley, rye, yeast, and wheat. Those are the building blocks for our business. And that's the reason why the wine industry, which has been started years ago, is so beneficial to the economy of this state. We haven't talked about fruit. Alexandria right now produces an entire portfolio of fruit-based spirits, using plums and peaches and grapes for brandy. We're one of the #1 producers of grapes in the country. These are products we're going to be sourcing locally. So I don't want to get too long-winded, but our business is going to have a huge local impact on not just local employees that we're going to be hiring to work in the factory, but we're going to be helping a lot of people who are involved in the agricultural industry in our local area. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I'm very happy to be working for this company. Having worked in international wine and spirits for over 20 years, this is one of the most exciting projects I've seen come our way. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from the board? Questions from the board?
I'd like to make a comment. Again, I'd also like to thank everybody for coming out and expressing your concerns. Alexandrian, thank you for doing a great job of a presentation here. You've heard the public, you've heard their concerns. We talked about having good neighbors. We hope that you would be a good neighbor to us. We have all wanted to get industry into this town, into the town of Carmel, to Putnam County. You're knocking at our door, and I personally would like to see this go ahead, but with the sensitivity of what the public concerns have and what your neighbors have. I want to make sure that their concerns are addressed and taken care of. Thank you.
Any comments from any consultants?
So you have a public hearing that you have to decide how to handle.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd like to see if there's a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Pat, would you prepare a resolution?
The next step would be the preparation of a draft resolution that incorporates all the issues that you've heard this evening, the conditions, the limitations, the thresholds. That would be embedded into a draft resolution for your review for adoption at the next meeting.
The next meeting would be the second Wednesday in August. And I'm sure everyone heard Pat, but everything that was heard tonight will be into the draft resolution. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you residents, and thank you for the distillery folks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you want to, is McDonald's here?
Oh.
Did anyone from McDonald's, I know I've asked earlier, did anyone from McDonald's come? We'll have to put that on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Make a motion to close?
Well,
We also have
Oh, the minutes.
the minutes of June 13th.
I didn't get a chance to review them. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to
Folks, the
make,
meeting's not over yet. Can you take the conversation outside?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes from the Town of Carmel Planning Board meeting held on June 13th, 2018. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain. I hadn't had a chance to review and I wasn't present.
Okay, and may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll
All in
second.
favor?
You're off by.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all.